Good morning, everyone. I'm so happy to introduce to you a friend of mine named Jeremy Sher. He was a pastry chef for 25 years. He is an actor. I hope some of you saw his show he wrote, The Dirty, Sexy Chocolate Show. And he moved to Missoula in 2012 from Chicago. And I want you to note his voice because he is a voiceover actor. So Jeremy, tell us your story.
Well, thank you. Good morning, everyone. And thanks for having me. Appreciate it. My story. It always depends who you're talking to, which story is most relevant. Because I think, like a lot of us, my path has been really windy. But like Sandy said, I've been acting and baking for about the same amount of time. It's really challenging for me to answer the question, what do you do? Because I legitimately do many things on parallel tracks at the same time. And so it's more of a convoluted answer. But I think you can correct me if I'm wrong, Sandy, but I think that one of the main reasons why you wanted me to talk was about COVID and what I've been doing in that time and what's come out of that. And that has been less on the acting side and more on the baking side. So I moved here from Chicago in 2012, and I've done theater, I've written shows and toured them, and I've baked in restaurants and cafes. But in the last year and a half, I've been intermittently out of work. And when COVID hit and we were in shelter in place and then quarantine, I live alone, and it got really lonely being isolated. And I understand a lot of other people in my life and in the world were going crazy with homeschooling kids and trying to hold down jobs and translating everything to Zoom meetings. And for me, it was all the way at the other end of that spectrum, which was basically a void. Not hearing from people, no social interaction, no sense of purpose, nothing to do. And I went into a depression. And then one day, I found myself really anxious, where before I was just sitting like a lump around all day, not knowing what to do. And then I woke up feeling like I have to do something. And I went into the kitchen and just started baking. And it was like when a baker starts baking, that translates to volume. Because, we're trained to crank it out. And even though I'm at home with my little KitchenAid and my little regular oven and regular pans and everything, I just kept going, and it turned into kind of a marathon. And then I ran out of room because stuff was everywhere and I just needed to get rid of it. So I started putting foil over the top and just driving it over to friends' houses and leaving it on their doorstep and texting them, hey, I dropped something off. And then, like 20 and 30 times of that, the same friends got hit over and over again. And they started saying, we're good, thank you. And so then I would just make a cake or something and take a picture of it and put it on Facebook and say, and this was just a lark. Who needs this? Who needs some love? Who needs some support? Who needs reminding that the work that they're doing in the world is useful, or that they, just because they exist, are useful or helpful or worth celebrating? And something kind of happened. So people started chiming in really vociferously through electronics, but they started saying, my neighbor is an ER nurse and she's really stressed out and can't sleep. Or my cousin is homeschooling 3 kids. 2 of them are really young, and her husband is helping, and they're all just in the thick of craziness trying to figure out how to do this. And then the stories started coming in. Um, my sister works at a retirement home, and her clients can't see any of their family, and they're all stressed out, and they could really use some love. And one after another started coming in, and I was just saying, yes, okay, great. I'll take them a cake. I'll do it. That's how I can feel useful. Um, and the way I presented it was that I will give that person this cake from you. And I'm not really into hashtags or anything out there in the digital world, but it, something just sort of popped in my head, and it was cake it forward. This notion of paying it forward with a cake. And so that was, I don't know when that was, 2 or 3 months ago. I've lost track of time. You talked about the Zoom meeting. Everyone thought it was Wednesday yesterday. I have no idea what month it is right now. So I think a lot of us get into that calendarless living in the time of COVID, and I'm no different. So I would just wake up in the morning and start baking and put pictures up and say, okay, I've got this chocolate mousse cake. I've got this a tort. I felt like making some eclairs. Some were rustic, some were fancy, and then people started reaching out to me proactively before I started putting anything up, and they said, "Hey, I've got someone I want to take care of. Hey, I don't even live in Missoula. Can you can you send something to my cousin? Hey, I don't live in Missoula, and I don't know anybody in Missoula, but I like what you're doing. Here's some money. Just keep it going." And so now I'm maybe up to 100 or so desserts that I've sent out. And it just feels really good. And I revisited my bookshelf maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. And when I was in Chicago, I helped devise a show that was based on the book called The Gift by Lewis Hyde. And in the book, he explores a different form of mindset and ultimately economy based on giving. And I had no presence of mind about this book when I started doing this. It was a radical act of just reaching out and trying to connect to people and trying to take care of people. And on a selfish level, it was therapeutic and it helped me feel good. But if it was helping other people feel good, I was just and I still am going to just keep doing it. But the book talks about, it goes into anthropology in one section and looks at indigenous cultures around the world, how they don't have status attached to belongings. In fact, they have the opposite, so that if you are holding belongings, your status starts to diminish because there's a spiritual component to giving. And there's a sense of ownership in relinquishing, which is a super cool dichotomy. And that you can't own possessions, but what you can own is acts of giving. And it got me, in doing that show was really fascinating because in creating a performance, a creative endeavor, you have to collaborate with all kinds of disciplines. And always in the theater, you are giving something to an audience. But when you get into the day-to-day grind of showing up at rehearsal while still holding down a job that actually does pay, while having a personal life, while juggling a hobby or two, while having a sliver of a social life, the act of giving, like on a macro level, kind of disappears sometimes, or at least gets clouded over or pushed to the side a little bit. So when we created this show, some of us lost the forest through the trees, where we were doing an act, we were creating something to give to audiences, and lost track of that. And it was a really fascinating case study of trying to do good, trying to gift, trying to keep something moving forward, and losing track of the value of that at the same time. And when I started doing this with the Cake It Forward, I'll say movement, but in air quotes, because it feels like organic and small and easy. And so as opposed to other movements where you really have to amplify voices and recruit community and things like that, this is just me giving cakes away. But it feels great. So again, air quotes around movement, and I'm okay with that. This notion of taking something and the value that's ascribed to it doesn't exist until it is gifted. And the value of the thing lies in the act of the thing moving forward, not in the thing itself.
Frame yourself. The camera's right
and
there.
So that was...
The camera is right there.
That was revelatory to me. And so this whole exercise, this whole notion of paying it forward has become a real daily meditation for me in a way, right? Because I love going into the kitchen. There's a lot of people who do what I do, which is stress baking right now. A lot of people are in the world of sourdough. If you go online or talk to your neighbors, everyone is making sourdough. And for weeks in Missoula, you couldn't find flour. It was just wiped out. And people were telling me they couldn't find yeast either. And that was really telling. When we all went into lockdown, that was not something I expected, was, oh, people are going to start baking bread. And so my version is sweeter in terms of ingredients, but no less sweet in terms of acts of kindness, making something and giving it away. People were giving me bagels. They were giving me bread. Sandy, a mutual friend of ours, started a bagel business, and Sandy said, "You know what? I'm buying you some bagels. You want some cream cheese too?" Like, heck yeah, I want some. That sounds great. So it's this notion of keeping things circulating. And I've also been mindful of the greater societal conversations that we have in terms of circulation, and that translates to our economy. And we are talking about keeping the money flowing. And it does not escape me, having been a starving artist for a long time, or a low-paid baker on the graveyard shift for years, that we can't escape money, right? It's necessary for all the things. But our conversation is almost always about economics. And what I'm discovering on a micro level with Caking It Forward is that in keeping something circulating forward, money is coming to me, where that's not the end goal. But there's a generosity and a sense of gratitude at the same time. I feel really lucky. And this morning and yesterday morning and a couple times last week, while I'm baking, ding, I get a message, and someone is completely unrelated to this in another part of the world offering me voiceover work. And I booked 3 audiobooks and 4 other voiceover jobs. I had no work when COVID hit. Like, it dried up. I was auditioning 12 to 15 times a day, 7 days a week for months and getting no work because everyone was at home doing that work. And so the competition just tripled or quadrupled. So I wasn't getting any work at all. And I was stuck. Like, there was a cork in the bottle, and there was nothing. The pressure was building in the bottle and nothing was happening. And then I just started giving cakes away. It sounds so stupid, but yeah, that's my story. As soon as I started doing that, then other parts of my life became uncorked. Socially, while people were locked down, people were reaching out to me where they hadn't been before, saying, you want to go on a hike? We can stay, socially distant and go on a hike. Our dogs can play while we're catching up. Do you want to come? I'm hanging out on my porch. Do you want to drive by and sit in my front yard and we can hang out? So it's like this thing that Lewis Hyde discussed in that book, The Gift, is that holding on to things can actually start to create a festering reaction, spiritually, and in some cases physically. In my case, it really was physically. I was starting to have digestion issues. I was starting to have sleep issues. I'm not an anxious person, but I was starting to have anxiety and definitely depression. And as soon as I started doing this, not even mindful of what I was doing, it was just start doing it. The more I poured out of the bowl in this direction, the more it was replenished from other directions. So I'm just going to keep doing it. And people have asked me or told me this. I've learned from all creative endeavors I've ever done. You're on to something when people start telling you, what you should really do. That is a sign that you're doing something right, because it's not about people telling you what to do. It's that you've sparked something. And there's some kind of value in that is, like you write a song and then you share it with someone and they say, oh, you should write a song about this. Or you put on a show and they say, oh, but it would be great if you toured it and you did it like this in these different kind of, and you really sort of attract opinions in a good way. So people have started saying, you should open a bakery. You should have a TV show. You should do all these things. And, and it's whatever those things are, that's lovely. It's the fact that one creative act is sparking ideas for more creative acts. And that part really keeps me going. That fills my cup. That, in a strange way, gives me a sense of purpose. Yeah. All right. I feel like I've been talking a lot. I don't know how this works. Is there Q&A or other people just sharing their experiences, or I don't know how it works.
So we'll open it up for people to ask you things.
Yeah.
Right.
Just signal and
Just a reminder, everyone's on mute. So if you do want to chime in, maybe just unmute.
Ken.
Well, first of all, thank you, Jeremy. Wonderful story and inspiring. Also, I love Lewis Hyde's book, which I haven't thought about for a long time. I think it came out about 30 years ago, and
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. So, can you tell us more, though? So, you are baking on demand almost at this stage. So, people put in requests, as it were, and you respond to those requests, or, and I might be asking for a friend about how that works. So,
Yeah. So, yeah, it really just started with me proactively putting stuff out there, and then people started coming to me and requesting. And sometimes it's just a cake order. It's yeah, my stepmom is having a birthday. I'd love to just get her a cake from someone who is doing this like one custom thing at a time. So I can't speak for their motivations, but it could be, sure, I can support a local bakery, or I can support an individual also in my community who's doing this thing. So now it's a mix. Sometimes I'm sending out on Saturday, this past Saturday, I think I sent out 7 or 8 custom desserts, which is, if you're in a bakery, that's fine. You're cranking them out. You're doing 50 or 200, however well you're set up. But at home, not knowing what I'm doing, it just turned into, oh, me too. Do you have any more? Do you, that kind of stuff. So then I'll do it again because I don't have big enough equipment to do big batch baking. So it turned into, 10 hours. It got really hot. I had to go buy an air conditioner because it was hot, and I couldn't roll pie dough in my kitchen. It was probably 90 degrees in my kitchen because the oven was on for 6 or 7 hours straight. So sometimes, getting back to your question, sometimes it is taking cake orders. Sometimes it is me just wanting to keep my hands busy and making stuff and then putting it out there saying, who wants this? It's yours. Yeah, I don't feel like I want to just call on people. I would say just chime in.
No, Wolf.
Jeremy, I was just looking at your Facebook page, and your creations, because that's what they are absolutely beautiful. I mean, you're not just baking, you're creating artwork based on those pictures. They're absolutely fabulous. My question was, you had a really interesting experience. You hear a lot about older people, isolated people who have a lot of the same experience that you had. I think you're the first one that I've heard of who's pretty young and kind of fell into a hole due to social isolation and depression. I was wondering, have you thought of writing a play or a piece on that experience? Because it's a really interesting COVID experience, how people fall into this dark hole. And then, what comes out of that and how you cope with that.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it speaks to one creative discipline informing another, which is a very common thing for me, actually, because I work on 2 paths. I work in 3D tactile craft, desserts, cakes, and such. And I also work in time-based performative arts, mostly in theater. And they have very consistently over decades informed each other. So I may be doing a play, and I may have a dream one night during rehearsals about how to change a dessert that I had done before into a different type of experience, different eating experience, something that combines multiple temperature. So it's got a cold element, a hot element, crunchy, creamy, that kind of thing, all because I'm in a dramatic scene with my scene partner and vice versa. So what's really interesting to me on that score right now, I really ebb and flow. And right now, Sandy knows this because she was intimately in proximity to this process, but I did a tour with Montana Repertory Theater that happened in mid-February before COVID was a thing stateside. So we didn't even know this, but we finished the tour and got through by the skin of our teeth. And we were clueless about it. You know, you'd pick up a paper and say, oh, well, China and all this kind of stuff is happening. Like, wow, that's really intense. Never thought about how it could impact us here, much less in the world of theater. Now reading headlines, Broadway's closed until January. So getting back to the question, at the moment, I have no interest in theater. And this is a very common thing for me. I really ride waves where I'm all in. All I want to do is write a play or produce something or act or whatever. And the pastry kind of wanes a little bit. And this has gone from like a personal level into a macro level for me, where I would go abandon theater whole cloth and open a bakery, which is a massive undertaking, hiring people, working with architects, building out the space, running it for 2-3 years, managing the books, everything. There's no, that's round the clock. There's no room for theater. And then someone would reach out to me and say, I want you to audition for the show. And I would get it. And it's a really amazing show with a 6-month run, 8 shows a week. And it's like, I have to leave the baking. This is an amazing opportunity. So right now, what's cooking in my head is a web series rather than a live performance. And this isn't even practical. It's not because of practicality, because there are no gatherings. It's not even related to that. It's what I'm interested in doing is making a dessert through video, not live, recorded and edited. That's partially how-to, like a cooking show, and fun, really short. Maybe it's 4 minutes long. I don't know. And then the real point of this is on video, taking that to someone and giving them this cake and talking with them. And the point is to meet interesting people in our community that people who nobody knows, not interviewing the mayor or the president of the university or someone who runs the United Way, people who have a public face, right? I'm interested in the person who lives down the block that no one really knows. They see them go get their mail. Who is this person? I want to take them a cake and talk to them and get their story. And the whole point is to elicit their story. And so that feels in keeping with the Cake It Forward spirit to me, and takes it into a storytelling realm by bringing cake to them and just talking. And so, very long answer to your question of should maybe write a play. Right now, I'm interested in possibly creating a series of videos where it's not about telling my story, it's about bringing other people's stories to light. And I'm the vehicle.